to go forward and negotiate in good faith with the city, which the city has made an offer they have rejected. From here, it is critical that they come back to the table and negotiate in good faith and not do an end around and run to the voters and try to do it effectively as a popularity contest. When you go out to early vote or you vote on election day, which I'm assuming every one of you will do, you will meet the firefighters that are there, and they will have their hats on, and they will tell you, if you support fire, you need to support Prop B. That is not the way it needs to be done. We love the firefighters. We need to reject Proposition B because it will hurt everyone in the city. And what is so, Chief Penny and I were talking about this just a few minutes ago, what the firefighters themselves do not realize is that many of them will lose their job if this passes. So they are lobbying and working hard to pass something that actually could cause them to be without a job. They don't realize that because they have been led to believe that this is not going to negatively affect them, that somewhere out of thin air, the city will come up with money and figure out how to pay them. It just doesn't work that way, unfortunately. So we need every one of you to go out and email everyone you know, and just exponential math works. If everybody in this room emails 50 people who email 50 people and tell them vote no on Prop B and tell the firefighters they see that they love them, thank you for their interest, and then go into the ballot box and vote no on Proposition B, we will literally reach tens of thousands of voters, and that is the difference, and that is what it will take to win this election. So it's very important that we all get engaged and we all motivate the people around us to vote against Proposition B. Thank you.
Great. Richard, can you top that?
I don't think so. And in fact, I'm not even going to choose to try to compete with it, but I'm going to pick up a couple other themes. But first of all, again, let me express my appreciation to the mayor, Christopher, Bob, for being on this panel. It's very important to me, and it's very important to the Houston Realty Business Coalition. I'm a trustee and the treasurer of HRBC. We're a decades-old real estate and business group advocating for real estate and businesses in Houston and their owners and their employees. And we have a mission statement under which we at HRBC support candidates and causes who in turn embrace our mission of protecting private property rights, encouraging capitalism, and for today's discussion, limited government. We're nonpartisan, but we support candidates and causes that support that mission statement, and this Proposition B brings us to the limited government issue. We have a situation here in my day job. I'm a lawyer. And I deal with contract negotiations and contract breaches every day. And this issue regarding firefighter pay was designed to be resolved through contract. There's a collective bargaining agreement that's been in place for several years between the city and the firefighters union, and that was designed to be the means to resolve pay disputes between these two private contracting parties. Yet what we have here is a situation where it's been referred to as an end run, creating a popularity contest. That was through a petition process, creating a referendum now known as Prop B on an overcrowded ballot, where the citizens and the government is intervening in this private party contract dispute. That's antithetical to the mission statement of limited government that we embrace at HRBC, and because of that, we're encouraging the voters, now that it is on the ballot, now that it is under Prop B, to vote against it for all of those fiscal reasons and public policy reasons that others more smart and that have studied it more than I have, I've already discussed. But because of this interest of limited government, if nothing else, let these private properties go back to the bargaining table and proceed under their collective bargaining agreement and resolve those issues without requiring government to intervene and go to the ballot and resolve it for them.
All right, thank you, Richard.
Thank you.
Let me prompt a little bit of discussion now, and then we'll open the floor up in a minute. Let me make very clear, though, one thing. The city operates under a revenue cap. That specifically is a property tax revenue cap, but effectively we have the same thing on the sales tax side by virtue of the fact that we operate at the highest level that the state allows for sales tax. So there is no revenue offset to a $100 million expense. It has to be covered by cuts elsewhere in the budget. So let me come back to the $100 million figure, Mayor, if I might. Your team has estimated this figure. Controller Chris Brown, and I always remind, as you sometimes do, that he is an elected official. He's not your controller, he's our controller. His team has come up with a similar estimate. Can you kind of defend that number? Because some have challenged it out in the community.
Well, essentially both of us, both the city's finance department and now the comptroller's office is putting that number at over $100 million. The comptroller recently revised his numbers and put it at 101. Okay, and so we are both saying that the cost of Proposition B is over $100 million. We are both saying that the cost of Proposition B is unsustainable for the city. So when you say $100 million and you say unsustainable, where are you going to get the money from? We are under, as you indicated, a property cap. We can't increase sales tax. And let me tell you, I don't think, and city council members can talk about it, I don't think we're going to be trying to increase fees to generate $100 million. I just don't see that happening.
I hope not.
Well, let me just tell you, Chris, let me just tell you, I'm certainly not going to, number one, I would not do it under any circumstances to give $100 million in pay raises.
Amen.
Even if I had the leeway under the property taxes, I would not do it because this is flawed. This is totally flawed. It would create a runaway train. So this, I wouldn't do it under these circumstances. Now, if we're talking about things for trucks and the infrastructure and all of the other things, that's a different subject matter. But just $100 million on pay raises without any of the other elements it just doesn't make good sense. Number two, this is not the public policy that I want to go down the road because you weaken the mayor. If we allow this sort of approach to take place, when any employee group cannot get what they want from the mayor, when they can go to someone else, it's bad. It's almost like saying, you know, Chris, I met your wife, Lisa, fine person. But if your kid went to you and you said no, and they go to Lisa, and Lisa said yes, you know, then it creates a dysfunctional family. Proposition B creates a dysfunctional city. And a dysfunctional city is not good for business. Okay, it's just not good. So no, we don't have the leeway to do it. We're all in agreement in the financial costs. And lastly, let me just say, this is not a city proposition. Chief Pena didn't come with this proposition. The union came with this proposition. Well, if you're going to ask people to vote for something, don't you think they should have studied what it costs? They have yet to put forth their numbers. And it is turning, I mean, they would like to turn this into a popularity contest, but this is, we all love firefighters, but if I'm asking you to vote on something, at least let me show you what I believe the cost will be. And they have not done that, and people are voting right now.
Well, and I will tell you, Bob, if I may, one of the things that we've run into as we've talked to people about this is this perception that this is just a catch-up. We're going to get $100 million of pay raise, we'll be then caught up, and what most people have no idea is that this is not a one-time, this is $100 million every single year for as far as the eye can see, plus inflation.
Now, so we've met with the firefighter union, with Marty. He was unwilling to put an estimate forward as to what he thought this would cost. Richard or Christopher, have either of you heard a number?
We met with him as well, and he could not do that at that time either.
Yeah. So that's, you know, it strikes us as frankly irresponsible to put forward to the public a charter amendment that will inevitably have a cost and then be unwilling to stand behind an estimate. But
and let me add one thing that the people need to consider. Let's just say, because people don't think, there's some who say, oh, they're not going to be layoffs. Well, let's say people vote for Proposition B. and 6 weeks or 6 months, we are starting to lay off a number of people. And people come to the conclusion, this is bad. This was not good. I wish I had not voted for this. Well, the earliest you can correct it, barring any sort of court action, the earliest the voters can correct it would be November of 2021. Because the charter says you can't bring another one within 2 full calendar years. Well, November of 20 is like 2 or 3 days short of 2 full calendar years. So the earliest the voters can correct it would be November of 2021.
We thought we would have a race with the mayor to see who could put a charter amendment on the ballot first in 2020, and then he told us, well, nobody's going to be putting one on in 2020. We both missed by 3 days. The firefighter union characterizes this as pay parity, but it has been noted that, or at least arguably, and I would say it's not true parity. Can you talk a little bit, maybe Christopher or Richard, and if not, I'll come back to the mayor, talk a little bit about the specifics of this proposal and what suggests parity and what might not? Anything? I can
I'll defer to you.
Yeah, I mean, to get really deep in the weeds, but I won't do that. But ultimately what you have is it's only pay parity if everything is equal. That's like saying people in my operations team and people on my finance team are exactly doing the same job. That's just simply not true. Also, it assumes that people have the exact same retirement benefits, which is definitively, in this case, not true at all. The retirement for the firefighters is significantly different, significantly greater than that for police and municipal. And having worked so closely with the mayor and so many others on pensions, we worked really hard to make that situation sustainable for the city to avoid an inevitable bankruptcy for the city. Well, now what we're doing with Proposition B passes is we're putting ourselves literally on path for a train wreck that is going to create a fiscal crisis for the city. So it's not equal pay, it is unequal pay because of the fact that without getting in the weeds, firefighters don't have to buy some of their own equipment. Police officers do have to buy some of their own equipment. So do you give somebody the exact same salary and say you have to buy your stuff and you don't? That's not fair. That's actually unequal pay. So the firefighters make it sound like it's equal pay when it's actually really, really not.
And the hours.
And
Chief Pinion can certainly speak to this. The hours between police and fire are different. The training requirements are different. The promotional requirements are different. The time the firefighters work 9 24-hour days a month. Okay, police officers work 22. There are a number of differences. The responsibilities are not the same. Now, do they both serve vital functions? Absolutely. Do we need police as much as we need fire? Absolutely. But the parity is only in proposition, only goes to rank and seniority, not to all of the other elements that would have to line up to actually gain parity. That's not included within the proposition. But they both serve equal function. And what I would add, if you take away my municipal workers, you're going to have trash and everything else. So everybody has a distinct, vital function for the city. The worst part to me, not the worst part, but the bad part of this discussion is that it pits employees groups against one another. It creates dysfunctional members within the family because you need municipal workers to support police and fire. You need fire to support police and municipal workers. And you need police to function to support all, and all three are needed to service businesses and people within the city. This conversation in the political realm is like a campaign for candidates, and it creates unnecessary division. And ultimately, the people who are hurt are the people in the city themselves.
Mayor, some of the questions I get just have to do with the relationship between the city and the firefighters. Kind of what went wrong? What has kept us from getting to an agreement? And a lot of this predates you. Obviously, Anise Parker put forward a proposal that was taken to the union for a vote and was turned down by the union. So what's what's gone on in the past, and then when you look forward, which is probably the more significant feature, what's going to happen if Prop B fails, as we hope it will? What will happen next with respect to the negotiation between the city and the union?
Let me just say, and I choose to separate the leadership is important. Leadership in any organization is important, okay? Leadership is important. I choose to separate the leadership of the union from the 4,000 firefighters themselves. And to me, it's important to separate, because if the leadership is not providing the information to those below, the rank and file will make decisions based on the information that they are given or not given. And they turned down the 4% underneath spark in 2015. But bear in mind, when I came into office, before I came in, firefighters supported me 100%. So this is not where you have the mayor and the mayor won and the firefighters are in opposition. I mean, understand, the firefighters supported me when I ran. As you all know, I've been a strong supporter of firefighters in my entire public service, 27 years as a legislator, and came in with firefighters. So the animosity was never there. And when I came into office, I looked and came to the conclusion, yes, firefighters are deserving of a pay raise. And we're going to do what we can within our budgetary constraints to provide them a pay raise. And what I said to them, but I hear what you're saying, but we're not going to be able to do everything at one time. Things have to take place over an extended period of time, but we have to stay within budget. We have to stay within budget. When I said no is when this issue emerged, that the request was more than the city can afford. But I will tell you, I don't care who you are, if you supported me, for example, and if you asked me to do something that's not in the best interest of the city, then my answer is no. It has to be no. So just because you say no doesn't mean that you don't respect people or love them. But if you're asking any of us to do something that's going to hurt the city that we represent, then the answer has to be no. And they do have collective bargaining. They've had collective bargaining since 2005.
This conversation has also just prompted a conversation in the community about how the fire department is run. You know, we have a 4-shift schedule, 4 different 24-hour shifts. Some people say that it could be 3 shifts. Maybe more significantly, people call out the fact that 80% of the firefighter call-outs are EMS and not fire suppression. Help me think about where do we go with respect to the fire department? And I'm somewhat getting outside of Prop B in terms of creating the most efficient and effective fire department. How might Prop B, if it were to pass, take us in a direction maybe we do or don't want to go?
And if you will, Chief, why don't you come up? Because what I will say, and I want Chief Payne to address it, but what I will say to you is that the model under which we are operating with the fire department is outdated. It is an outdated model. And what I will say to you is that irrespective of what takes place on Proposition B, the fire department will be restructured. 80+% of the calls are EMS related. The system, the model under which the city has been operating for quite some time is a very costly model. It is cost inefficient. Okay? And so it has to be restructured. It needs to be restructured. It will be restructured, regardless of the vote on Proposition B. But Chief, if you want to address that.
You now have the floor. I've lost my mic. You're in complete control.
Well, good afternoon. This thing on? Good afternoon. My name is Sam Peña. I'm the fire chief for the city of Houston. I've been here almost 2 years. And to speak about the restructuring, there is a need to look at the organization and the way our deployment model is set up right now. There are efficiencies that we can take, that we can seek to right-size this organization and focus on the primary demand in this community. 70 to 80% of our call volume is in the EMS realm. Okay? Now in that we include vehicle accidents, we include rescues, but because there's patients, we classify them as EMS. Okay, so there always is going to be a need for fire suppression units. But we have to reorganize and redeploy our system to be able to free up and create some capacity to allow more transport units, ambulance service. We haven't added one ambulance in almost 20 years, right? But the call volume in EMS keeps going up 1% to 2% each year. So we have not done nothing as far as look at the organization, the structure, to ensure that we are directing our limited resources in the right direction. There are opportunities to restructure to be able to address that. My hope was to be able to take some time to phase that restructuring in. There's a difference if we're able to phase in the changes, allow us some time to acquire resources, allow us time to acquire the training that our firefighters need to be able to redeploy into certain areas, and to do it in a way that does not affect service now. From my perspective, as the fire chief, of course I want our firefighters to get everything they want. Pay raises, or the pay scale, the difference, the disparity between us and our market is getting a little bit bigger. Every year that we go without a contract, it gets a little bit bigger. And that has an effect on recruitment, on retention, on morale, on customer service, on attendance. So that aspect needs to be addressed for certain, but in a way that doesn't force me to have to choose between personnel and staffing and the service that the organization, that this department delivers to this community. Because it is important to take care of our personnel. I need to acquire and I need to advocate for resources to pay them the salary that they deserve, to get them the training and the development and the safety programs that they deserve. So personnel is important, but mission always, and that's my focus. I have to focus on what does it take to deliver the mission, to deliver the service, and I get work done through people. We're not an automated system. We need personnel. I need every one of the firefighters that we have right now if we keep the same structure. So anything that increases my overhead, if my overhead increases by $100 million, I'm going to go to City Council and say, I need $100 million more in order to deliver the same service. If their answer is no, then I have to come back and offer a way to meet that target, that budgetary target, and still be able to deliver the service that this community needs. I'm not sure if I answered the question or not. But
I'm gonna, yeah, Dave.
He's talked about consequence management, which is what he's going to have to deal with when we are forced to make those hard decisions. That's the firing that the mayor is talking about. And I don't know how you're going to do it. I don't know how you're going to present that to council chief.
Well, council member, we're going to be in this together, right? And here's why. Here's why. Because again, the increase, my bottom line, my overhead is going to increase by $100 million, or $98 million at least. If there is no capacity to identify a revenue stream to be able to offset that, and the answer from City Council is, we don't have $100 million, we're going to have to find and stay under a specific target. The only way I'm able to do that, knowing that 91% of my budget, of a $503 million budget, 91% is personnel, then that is the area that I'm going to have to look into, which means reducing the number of firefighters. $98 million represents roughly about 900 firefighters. I would not make that recommendation to fire 900 firefighters, because then we don't have a fire department. We don't. But the cuts are going to be more than what's expected. And so, yes, in order to, again, ensure that I have the staffing to deliver the service, just to break even at this point, I need a certain number of firefighters. I need a certain number of equipment, training, investment in personnel, investment in health and safety aspects, because that's our obligation as a community to our firefighters who go out there every day and do an outstanding job. It's not about that. And I want them to get the pay that they deserve. I do. That would solve one of my biggest issue right now is the disparity in pay. But that doesn't account for everything else, every other one of the hygiene factors that I have to address, which is the apparatus, health and safety programs, facility needs, professional development. All those things are going to remain, and I'm going to keep coming back to you for that obligation. Understanding that if we divorce operations from finance, we don't get the full picture, okay? Here's one example. When there's a vacancy, I have to maintain constant staffing on these apparatus. Not because I want to, but because that's a legal requirement. There's a legal obligation that, and a certain standard of care that I have to maintain. In order to do that, I need a certain number of people on every emergency scene, right? So when there's a vacancy, I have to call people in on overtime. When the cost per labor goes up, that overtime issue is going to go up as well. So that's what I'm saying. It's very difficult to divorce finance from operations and get a full comprehension of what the program is going to cost. That's why it's important for us to get back to the table, arrive at an agreement that is respectful of the firefighters, respectful of the taxpayer, and allows us to deliver the same level of service that this community is expected. And find a way to aggressively get us up to market value, because it is having an effect on retention and recruitment and morale and all the other things that we talked about.
But unfortunately, what I would say to you, Proposition B doesn't give you that discretion. Mm-hmm. Proposition B mandates. And what people have to understand, whether you like the referendum system or not, if the people speak, if they issue a mandate, on November the 7th, we do not have the obligation we cannot negotiate the people's vote. Okay, this is not city council. If the voters say do it, mayor, then the mayor has to do it, barring a judge saying otherwise. But you cannot on November 7th sit down and say, let's come up now with a reasonable solution. The voters mandated. You have to respect the will of the mandate. And whether people like it or not, and what we've been saying, there will be layoffs. And I'm not going to, raise my voice on it. I'm not going to, just say it to hear myself saying it. But if you're obligated to balance your budget, and if the voters say put $100 million on salaries for firefighters, then there are consequences. And there will be consequences. And the public, I know, won't like it. But it won't be the mayor and city council voting it in.
Yeah. Let's open the floor up to questions if we could. Frank, how are you?
I'm Frank Wilson. I'm the former CFO of the Department of Police in Chicago.
That's right.
I just want to tell you that the collective bargaining process is extremely expensive. What I mean by that is police get all kinds of payments out of their salary. In Chicago, they have something called Me Too. So whenever you do something to affect police pay, the firemen say, well, Me Too. People say things. So I voted on Tuesday and I saw Prop B. It was 3 pages long. But what it has is it has Me Too, Me Too. Everything, every category of pay that police get is being requested as well.
Yeah,
so it's
Frank.
Not $100 million. It's not just $100 million every year. It's the next time you go to the collective bargaining table,
right,
and police say, we want...
That is correct.
Fire's right there with you.
That is correct.
Yeah, Frank, I know Frank, his wife Donna serves on the board of the partnership. I know he has that background in Chicago. And it's been interesting that some have said, well, wait a minute, Chicago and New York have pay parity. Well, there's no businessman in Chicago or New York who would say that's where they should be, because it has created all kinds of issues like you're describing, Frank. So thanks.
You don't want Chicago and Houston.
No, that's not our model. Mike, go ahead.
2 quick questions. 1, how about credit agency considerations? And 2, with respect to ISO ratings for the fire department, the impact on insurance rates on businesses and personal residents.
Both of those issues are important. Moody, Fitch, and S&P are looking at and will make their own assessment if people should vote on Proposition B. But I will tell you, all of the concerns that we had on pensions exist right here. Rising costs, unsustainable, okay, and reoccurring. So I don't anticipate that they are going to be pleased if the decision is to add another $100 million. And just like Frank just said, I mean, Proposition B says anytime police get something, you must give it to fire. In a sense, the firefighters union may as well go take a seat, because police will be negotiating for them from this point forward. And then it becomes simply automatic. Well, you think Moody and Fitch and S&P are going to like that? Or do you think police are going to like it if the mayor says, well, if I give one to you, then I may as well give two, and so I'm not going to give any? Now you really have a problem, because HPD is not going to sit down and say that. They're going to say, Mayor, look, we didn't do that. We didn't vote it in. So on the insurance side, all of those elements will probably be adversely impacted as well. It's a bad deal all the way around.
You know, thinking of the credit rating agencies, I'll just say this, don't like RevCap. Mayor and I are not always on the same page with respect to RevCap. But we're getting there. But we're getting there. But what the rating agencies don't like about RevCap is how RevCap could interface with a rising cost structure and then create a service deficiency that over time would just drag the city down. And that's why they were, you know, what they really didn't like about pensions and the inexorable rise in pension costs was that how it was running into the RevCap and forcing the city to just cut services. Well before cities become bankrupt financially, they become bankrupt in terms of their ability to provide services. So the rating agencies are very nervous about this issue being another force that would drive our costs up towards that RevCap.
Yeah, and if I could, Bob, the second part of Mike's question asked about the ISO ratings, and from what I understand, fire departments are awarded ISO ratings, and then those ratings in turn relate directly to the homeowner's insurance costs.
That's correct.
And it follows to reason that if we're going to have layoffs in the fire department, it's likely that our ISO rating is going to suffer accordingly, and that every individual homeowner that has to pay his own fire insurance policy will not have that favorable rating and will have to pay higher premiums as a result of this.
Other questions? Yeah. Thank you.
Let us dig in. I'm an everyday person, a small business owner, and I know a guy that used to manage a little finance sector in the city, but you say this is not a one-time fix. You just hit a chord. This is an every year.
This is recurring.
Well, this links the two indefinitely. Yeah, so that it's not like $100 million is going to flow out one time from the city budget. No, we've now added $100 million a year, and it actually grows over time with inflation to the annual expense base. Yeah, no, that's right. Yeah. But Mayor, I'm going to go back to something because Chief Payne, you raised it, and I've heard you give the answer to this question. Even if we make the restructuring reforms that are probably due in the fire department, some of the things you referred to and Chief Payne you referred to, that's not to suggest that we can offset a $100 million increase in costs with some reform.
And Chief has said it in about 12 town hall meetings, that even with radically restructuring the fire department, the cost reductions will only be about $20 million. So you still have to find $80 million elsewhere. And that's why you've had Chief Aceveda at most of these town hall meetings saying, you know, the only other big department is police, okay? And that's why you got council members saying what will be the impact on their districts when it comes to services. And who's going to vote to reduce the services in the respective districts? So that's why this thing is very, very bad. It's bad on so many multiple levels. That's why I appreciate this forum today, because people are trying to condense it to whether you love firefighters or not. This is not a popularity contest. This is an issue of fiscal responsibility, integrity, and public policy, and appreciating that these employee-type decisions should be left to the bargaining table and not in a referendum. Quite frankly, I hope the legislature will take action so that this will, regardless of what takes place on November 6th, we shouldn't be dealing with this. No city should go through this.
Yeah. So I'm going to conclude this way. I know we've run out of time. It may seem like we haven't presented a very balanced discussion of Prop B. I kind of feel that way sitting here. That's frankly because there's not a great argument in favor of Prop B. We agree that firefighters are due a raise. There's no one up here that says the firefighters are not due a raise. We're simply suggesting that the magnitude of that raise can't be 29% day one, and it should be arrived at through negotiations at the bargaining table. Every other aspect of this proposal is such bad public policy. It will have so many negative ramifications on this city. It is hard to know where to stop. There is no countervailing argument that says this is good public policy, that this is a way to run a city. This is how compensation should be determined. Right. It's just not that kind of issue. Sometimes we have issues that are gray. This is not a gray issue, so we're not presenting it as gray. But I tell you our problem is that the voters of Houston, when presented the question of do you believe that firefighters should be paid comparably to police, inevitably say yes, just like you or I would. We would say that equal pay for equal work or something like that. And it's just very hard to get the public to go beyond that thought and look at the specifics and understand the ramifications. So it takes people like all of us, all of you that are here, to really get this word out. Because I promise you, the friends you know, if you ask them where they stand on Prop B, are very likely to tell you, I support it. Why wouldn't you support it? And it's incumbent upon all of us to take this message, these facts, these arguments out. You said 50 times
50 times 50 times 50. I mean, it's just exponential social media, as you just talked about. You know, we have the ability to get the word out to folks. We just have to actually care enough to do so. And this is a big, big deal that will affect every single person. And I got to tell you, I didn't even realize until we talked about it, the insurance costs for homeowners. That's a message that we need to, we need to hit that because it hits people right in the wallet.
Mayor, any last comment?
I will simply say to you, and I want to dispel this. Some people say, well, vote for it, and then the mayor won't have a chance to come back with a revenue cap proposal, da-da-da-da. Let me just say, voting for Proposition A, you're not going to be able to deal with any revenue cap before November 21 anyway, okay? And quite frankly, the city has been doing pretty well in operating within its budgetary constraints. And since pension reform, the cost avoidance on this past budget alone was $300 million. So, the city has been making some significant positive strides, moving in the right direction, and that's a good thing. And then there's some says, well, Mayor, y'all just can't win this. I will tell you, in the last 2 weeks, not counting Monday, the favorability of Proposition B dropped 16+%. And when you look at the tracking, it's going like this. Because more people hear about it, they say no. When people get the information, you say 29%, $100 million a year, people say no. That's too much. So if you give people the information, then people respond accordingly. And so we just have to continue to say, B is very, very, very bad. We love the firefighters. They deserve a pay raise, but they deserve a pay raise that the city can afford.
Great. All right. Thank you all for being here. We'll hang around for a minute.
Thank you again. Thank you.
Thanks for the baby part of it.
Oh, but that insurance deal, that's